Hi everybody, just wanted to thank you for coming out tonight, and I want to share with you a story that is near and dear to my heart, and it's a story about a person who went through a lot of things in her life and made a lot of choices that were not good choices, and how God's redemptive power turned her life around and brought her to a place where He can actually use her today. And the story starts back long time ago. Actually, the story is about me. It is a story where I was raised as a preacher's kid, and as a preacher's kid I knew all the stories, I knew the Bible, and I was forced to live that life, setting the example for everyone and having to dress the dress and talk the talk and walk the walk. Even though I didn't always believe it, it was my parents' beliefs and it was imposed upon me. And there's always a time in your life that you have to face that crisis of trying to figure out what you believe. And I did go through that process, and it was quite the process actually. And I, at a young age, in my teenage years, I started rebelling and running from God, and I got into some things, made some choices with things that I shouldn't have done. I think we all have probably done those things. And at an early age, I got married. I always had this belief that Jesus was going to come back before I was going to get to experience life, so I rushed out and married the first guy that came along that showed me any attention. That was mistake number one. And I married him young, and quickly we had children. We had 2 boys in 2 years, and we were both just very immature, and we both ran to our parents and told them everything. We fought all the time. We had high expectations of what marriage should be like, and it just wasn't like that. So after 2 years and 2 kids, we ended up divorced. And me being the rebellious person that I was at that stage of my life, I decided I was free and I had never been on my own, and so I went into the bars and started having fun, started experimenting with some alcohol and doing some things, just partying, really having a good time when I thought it was a good time at that point in my life. Well, guess what? I met my second husband in the bar. That should have been clue number 1 for me to know to turn and run the other way, but I didn't, and fell in love with this man, and he was just, in my mind, he was at that point what I was looking for, and he treated me like a queen, and he was really good to the boys too, and so that was something that I thought was good. So we got married, and almost immediately things changed, and it became an abusive relationship. We were faced with physical abuse and emotional abuse, verbal abuse. I mean, there were several times when we had called police, and there were times of just knockdown, drag-out fights. Literally, I remember one time I was 6 months pregnant with our child, and I walked into the bedroom where my son was, and he had his hands wrapped around my son's neck and had him lifted up off of the ground, and he was shaking him and choking him. And I was just like a mama bear at that point, and I got so mad, and I ran at him and I shoved him, which I shouldn't have done, but I did because I was so mad, and he fell across the room, got up, and I mean, I'm 6 months pregnant, huge, because it's my 3rd child. Anyway, and he shoves me across the room, and I fall to the floor. And that's just one little example of what we went through for 7 years. And because I had failed in the first marriage, and I grew up believing that divorce was wrong, that you should never divorce no matter what. I have since found out that there are biblical reasons for divorce, and that's an entire different story. However, when I was in the situation, and I didn't want it to fail, so I tried everything that I could. I tried, being soft-spoken and doing everything that he said, but then I found out I was a doormat. And then I tried just, being independent and talking up for myself, and that just definitely didn't work, because he didn't like that at all. And we tried going to counseling together, and for a while that worked, but then he stopped going, and I continued on, but it just didn't change. So 7 years later, I'm praying and I'm seeking the Lord. What should I do? What should I do? I feel like I have exhausted everything that I can possibly exhaust. And I came to a point where I started noticing that my oldest son, especially, who started behaving like he did, he became abusive himself. He started pushing and shoving and doing things, and I was like, oh my goodness, it was like an eye-opener for me. And it was a time when I said, okay, I have got to do something seriously or my children will be ruined forever. And so I sought the help of a pastor, and I asked the pastor, I told him, explained everything that happened and what I should do, and he said, you need to get a divorce attorney. And so I did. I mean, that's all it took, and I did. And it was like, thank you, Jesus, because I tell you what, from that point forward, my children's lives, I still had a lot of struggles with the kids after that, but it takes time once you've gone through all of that to heal. But things changed and things got better. But after the divorce was final, then I decided, okay, I'm not going to be stupid like I was the first time and run to the bars and try to be free and whatever, because that surely didn't turn out right. So I decided I'm going to stay in church, I'm going to surround myself with godly people, and I'm going to focus on the kids. I'm going to focus on them and myself and try and keep myself healthy and stable for them. So I did so, and I was just trucking along, and I was seeking God, and things were going all right. I mean, it was hard, hard being a single mom of 3 kids. And, but God was always there for me. He always sustained me. He always provided for me. And so we're trucking along and going to church every time the doors were open. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, God brings along Nathan, who is my husband today. And I tell you what, that was a total God thing, because he, coming into our lives, he has totally changed every single one of us. I remember a year after we got married, people would come up to me and say the way that the kids were before we got married to a year later, it was like a 180. And it was just that influence of having a godly man in our lives. And I tell you what captured my heart was when we were together one evening and I was telling him about some of the things that I was dealing with my oldest son, and how I was struggling with him because he was still having the effects of the abuse, and so he was quite abusive himself. And he said, well, you know what? Let's just pray for him right now. And he just led in a prayer, and I tell you what, that just grabbed my heart. And I was like, I almost cried, and it was like, Lord, I want a man like this in my life. And it wasn't much longer that he asked me to marry him, and we got married. And it has been the best thing that has ever happened, is getting married to him, besides having my children. And I tell you what, going through all of that, I was really beaten down, and I was had a very, very bad self-esteem. And I believed that God's plan was this plan, and it was a perfect plan. And that because I had made these poor choices, that I was going to live an altered plan, that my life would never be fulfilled completely the way God had wanted it. But through the healing process of all of that, and through getting closer to the Lord and studying His Word, I have learned that actually God knew before I was born what I was going to be like. He knew the choices that I was going to make, and that was all part of the plan. I came to realize that's all part of His plan. And there's some scriptures that I think really go along with that. And one is Proverbs 16:3, and it says to commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. So, but it takes a commitment to the Lord. And if you don't have that commitment to the Lord, then your plans aren't going to be established the way they should be. And then Jeremiah 29:11, I love this scripture. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And I was a person who was hopeless at a time in my life. I didn't have hope, and I didn't know how I was going to get out of that, and how God would ever use me. But I tell you what, He has turned it around, and He is beginning to use me, and I'm so excited about it, so excited. But I have an example for you I want to share with you. Here is a pot, and you see this beautiful pot. It's really nice, right? Okay. This pot can hold water, It can hold flowers. It can do a lot of nice things, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I have here a candle, and this candle represents Jesus and the light of Jesus that should be in all of our lives. Now, what happens when I light this candle and I put it inside this perfect pot? Can you see the light of Jesus in there coming forth?
Nope.
Can you see it?
No.
No.
Okay. But none of us are perfect. Only Jesus is perfect, correct? So I have a pot that better represents who we are. And this is a cracked pot. It's a cracked pot, and it has holes and it has cracks all over it. See? Now, let's just say that this hole right here represents divorce. And we all have things in our lives that are things that we're not proud of, mistakes that we've made, poor choices. It could be circumstances, that we've been faced with that are just causing us to be, downtrodden and hopeless. This here could be abortion. And maybe this hole here could be drug abuse. We all have those things. So each one of you, as you look at this pot, think about what it is that is in your life that is cracked. Okay? But when we take the light of Jesus in our cracked lives and we put Jesus inside, what happens? If I get this in here without burning myself, what happens here? What do you see?
You can see the light.
You see the light.
The light shines through.
Where do you see the light coming from?
Through the holes.
Through the holes, and it's coming from?
Inside.
Inside. And that's really what Jesus wants to do. He wants to take his light and shine it through the cracks and the holes that we have in our lives so that we can reach the world for him and with his message. So we just have to be willing to commit our ways to him, and he will do that for us.